Go ahead and get started. Y'all know me, Miss Tyner. Teaching English 1 and 2, and I'm working towards, we're going to talk today about improving literacy in our school, starting with vocabulary instruction, because vocabulary instruction is pretty much the cornerstone of the literacy gaps in our school at this point. Objectives. Someone read the objectives for me.
Understand the importance of teaching vocabulary in conjunction with reading to improve scholar literacy. The learner will be able to recognize one vocabulary strategy that will help scholars learn vocabulary terms and increase their academic lexicon. The learner will be able to select a text from future readings and plan a lesson to implement vocabulary strategies.
All right, so we're going to go through, I want to make this as hands-on as possible. Because from PDs we've sat through, we don't want to sit here and just be told what to do. We want to actually think about how we can implement this in our classrooms. This is something that could be useful. And I am hyper-focusing this on the English aspect of things for language arts, since we're all part of the English department here right now. Yes?
I just realized that's supposed to be the teacher will be able to, and that's not bad.
It's okay. You are learning, right?
No wonder people were cringing.
All right, so let's talk about ELL scholars and their instructional needs. This is really important to think about given the kids that we serve at our school, particularly. So according to Echeverria, EL scholars are the fastest group of students, increase of 14% in grades K to 12 in an 8-year span. So we have had like a huge growth in EL students. This is nationwide. Nearly 10% of scholars in the United States are identified as EL. And there's a lot who aren't, because remember when they do the EL certification, or not certification, testing, a lot of parents say no, they're fine, and don't let their children be identified as EL, even though we know that they are EL, because they're afraid of that label being put on their children. Many students who have passed proficiency exams are still struggling in the English language. Just because they can pass the test doesn't mean that they can use the language, and we see that in our own classes. States with the highest percentage, this actually really kind of threw me. Alaska, I was not expecting Alaska on that list. But I guess when you think about it, because we think immediately EL scholars, because where we're at, we think Spanish. Alaska has a high concentration of natives, so you have a lot of EL there. And then people are moving into there. California, Colorado, Hawaii, again, another place of high native population. Yeah, Colorado has a lot of natives, Native Americans, and Hispanic. Nevada, New Mexico, Oregon. That one really did confuse me. Yeah, but that one did. I was like, Oregon. A lot of places. And Texas, of course. Right? All right. So, turn and talk. With your elbow partner, please discuss how you currently teach vocabulary. So some things to talk about. Do you even teach it? If not, why not? And if you do teach it, what are the methods you use and why? So I'll give you 2 minutes to talk.
Would you like to start?
Actually, sure. For LY, I do word roots. We try to identify word roots, and I try to get them to pull them out, and then we like to find this is what the word root means, and then they try to define words we've never seen with the word root in it. So it's a lot of trying to look at the small parts if that makes sense.
Totally. I've been implementing a prefix suffix thing in my class, so instead of the root, we're doing the suffixes. I found that it does help with basic understanding. Like if it's pro, they know it means for something, and anta it means for. So it helps a little bit, but part of the issue is that they just need to sit down and learn some of these words.
All right, we'll stop the timer since we've got a small group today. So yeah, what I heard is we are doing vocabulary, right? And we're doing either looking at the grouping of words, looking at the roots, no, not the root word, prefixes, suffixes, right? What are some of the gaps you're noticing when you're trying to teach it though?
A lot of them just don't know that words are made up of parts of other words. I don't understand languages.
When you have the big words, yeah. The English language is like a hodgepodge of other languages, right? So we see a huge gap when we're trying to teach our kids vocabulary. And they're like, but I'm confused. That doesn't make sense to me. What is that? And then they just don't have the academic language to begin with everything. They don't know the base words to help build on everything else. What I see a lot of instruction looks like in many classes where I see like my own kids, they come in and they're working on stuff for other classes and it's all on vocab.com, which I've done. I still do vocab.com, but now I'm trying to be more targeted with my vocabulary instruction at this point, because vocab.com, if all you do is just give them a list of words that they have to study over and over and over again, but you never use it, you never go back and reflect on it or any of that, they actually learn the word? No, they learn it, they memorize it enough to pass a test that they're going to have to take, and then they move on with their lives. They forget it, they never use it, and then they're like, what was the point of this? So we're going to talk today about some of the gaps, the instruction for evidence, why it's so important, and then we're going to talk about some ways that we can address their gaps that they have. This was actually really eye-opening for me. A lot of us as teachers don't know some of the history and the reasons why we have to do some of this stuff. This is a gap I realized when I was starting to look into the literacy practices here at the school, is teachers don't know the why. And if teachers don't know the why, then how can we actually help our kids? So we're going to talk about some of the why. So the first thing we have is something called the Matthew effect, and this actually shook me when I read this. I'm going to zoom in a little because I can. Alright, so students with larger initial vocabularies get more exposure to new vocabulary through increased oral language and reading experiences and are better able to learn from those experiences. Right, this is something we've heard a lot, right? But the gap starts in primary school, like elementary school. It develops by 4th grade and widens from there. So we have what's called the Matthew effect. So by 4th grade, there is a gap in vocabulary. And then moving on from 4th grade, the kids have the idea of those who already have a large vocabulary in 4th grade continue to grow their vocabulary. And those who don't have a large enough vocabulary, the gap widens for them because they're not growing as quickly as their peers. This was actually coined from the Bible. In Matthew, the rich get richer, the poor get poorer. It's the same concept there. The kids who have a rich vocabulary get richer at vocabulary. The kids who are poor in it get poorer in it. And they struggle further and further with their own. Oh, what did I do? Sorry. Sorry.
When you're referring to the Matthew effect, are you referring to ELL scholars only or just scholars?
This is scholars in general, overall, right? So this is overall all kids K to 12. This isn't even looking specifically into EL scholars, but that goes into the question. I'll just pose the question since there's not a lot of us in here. If the gap starts as early as 4th grade, so I want you thinking specifically, as early as 4th grade is when they've, like scientific studies have showed, it starts in 4th grade, right? Why could it be even wider for our scholars here at our school?
They don't speak English at home most of the time, and they're already like bilingual. But
Right.
they're not bilingual.
They're not bilingual,
They're
right?
okay in both languages.
They're illiterate in both languages, honestly. They're illiterate in their home language, they're illiterate in English. How many of our kids, though, never even went to primary school in the United States? I mean, you can go talk to any one of our freshmen, and they tell you specifically they didn't go to school in the U.S. Some of them didn't enter our country until middle school, and then they had to learn English in middle school. And we know we have here 9 newcomers. 9, if you include.
The upper grades.
No, I'm just talking just the freshmen. 9 that I know of for sure in my class. 8 technically who are brand new, and then 1 who's still beginner, intermediate. Right, so if we have kids who are brand new to our country in 9th grade, or brand new in 6th or 7th grade, but the gap started in 4th grade, do you think their gap is even wider?
Yes.
Yes, they don't have that vocabulary. They have no lexicon. They're starting from being told, my name is blank, while also still sitting in our classrooms and trying to keep up with all the academic jargon. And then we're throw a group of vocabulary words at them, say learn these. But they don't even know how to learn the definitions. And that's a big struggle, right? They don't even know the words that make up the definition. If we just throw the words at them and say, okay, memorize these words, then they're never actually going to internalize the definitions. Okay, so ways to incorporate purposeful vocabulary instruction. So we're going to talk about 2 different ways. One is very, very English specific. And then the other one is something that can be used in any classroom. It could be used in a math classroom, science classroom, English classroom, art, PE. There's vocab words in PE. I don't know, I forgot. So any classroom though. There's vocabulary, you can use the second method in any classroom. But I do want to talk about the English specific one. We're going to spend a little time on that since we are in the English department. So, sustained silent reading. How many of us use that in our classroom?
I do, but it's really hard to get the kids into reading. Sometimes they'll just sit there and pretend that they're reading.
Yeah. So then we have to have purpose for their reading, which is something that you can do. I worked with Stags a lot with creating purpose for their reading with my sophomores. I've not tried this with freshmen yet. But this is also, studies have shown when scholars are allowed to select their own books, so this could be something simple based on what they're used to, right? Studies have shown an increase in reading comprehension and vocabulary development. The best way to learn vocabulary and increase that lexicon is by reading. It increases, this seems like a no-duh thing, but I think we spend so much time, we're like, oh, we have to get them ready for a test, we have to get them writing, we have to get them doing this. But if they can just sit and read, they will actually start increasing their vocabulary development. Free reading also improves their writing and grammar skills simply by being exposed to more literature, right? We talk a lot about using mentor texts in the classroom for writing, but we're very, very specific about those mentor texts. So when you sit, we'll talk more about like conferencing with them to make it purposeful. I really hope I can be heard over the band. So we need to make sure that it's very, very purposeful when we meet with them, that their reading is purposeful, and that they're not just sitting there staring at the book, because some of my kids will do that. They'll just sit there and stare. So we'll talk about some ways we can do that. So what it's not, just letting them read whatever they feel like reading. So like they can't just bring in just a newspaper. They can't bring in a basic comic book. The lower kids or the brand new kids, graphic novels are a beautiful thing because it exposes them to the language, but it gives the visual imagery. But there's very few kids where a graphic novel will actually be acceptable. They need to pick one. Lack of accountability for what they read. So it's not just come in and just read. There needs to be some sort of accountability.